So everybody knows that the Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard acquisition is kind of up in the air. Like, it's something that's been hotly debated over the last year or so, and for good reason. I mean, it's a huge acquisition. A $70 billion acquisition is nothing to scoff at, and as a result, people are really, really iffy on whether or not it will actually go through. And there's been a lot of debate on it. If we go here, how we can break down what the general sentiment is with this. I'm getting so excited, I'm like stumbling over my words. This is Activision Blizzard's stock ticker, and Activision Blizzard's stock ticker is currently at 77.39. 77.39 seems like a pretty good stock price. The reason that this is of note is because Microsoft offered $95 a share. Okay, so this is not 95. So why isn't it 95? Microsoft offered to buy it for 95. If the market were perfect, this would be at 95, because everybody would be like, well, Microsoft's about to buy it for 95, so we'll trade it up to 95, and that's the fair price because that's what it's going to trade for once the deal goes through. The reason it's not there is because of one big, very important, juicy word: uncertainty. And that's the operative term in this case. It's really not clear if this deal goes through. And so right now, the fact that we see this trading down at 77 when the perfect price, if the deal were confirmed going through, we got word today, yep, it's going through, it's happening, this would immediately shoot up to 95. It would trade all the way up there and then it would stick at 95. So there's still a good amount of uncertainty. And if we go back in time, like year to date, you can see over the course of the year, there's been dips. And pretty much all of this, right now, it's not trading off of company performance mostly. It's mostly trading off of whether or not this deal goes through. You can see right around here on the 6th, there was news that I believe it was the European Standard Board was going to get involved and they were going to oppose the deal, and they had notes and things that they wanted them to change. And so that popped in here, and then like, maybe we overreacted. Nope, we definitely didn't. We're still very scared. And then it progresses. People calm down a little bit, and you can track this all the way back a year. Actually, let's go like 3 years. And you can see like the stock started trading lower and lower and lower, really low. And then they announced that they want to buy it. And then it shoots up to 81, and it's been floating there ever since. So what's changed? Like, is this actually going to go through? Do they have a chance at actually pulling this off? It's a little complicated, but if we look at some of the latest news, Microsoft is starting to get aggressive, because basically the only reason this wouldn't go through is because of lobbying from PlayStation mostly. And you will say, well, Luke, there's been lobbying from other companies, not PlayStation, for this deal not to go through. Yes. But most of that lobbying, for example, NVIDIA lobbied pretty heavily that this deal shouldn't go through and that it would decrease competition. Why would they do that? The reason they do that is because if they lobby and they stand in opposition to the deal, they can get Microsoft to give them something to get them to calm down. They'll freak out and then they get something and they sit back down. It's just basic like negotiations, you know, like, okay, well, these people, Microsoft really wants this $70 billion deal to go through. They really, really want it to go through. They're putting $70 billion on the line. So I'm going to stand up, cause a little fuss, and get them to throw me a bone. And then I'll sit back down. So I win, they win, because now I'm not standing in their way anymore. Everybody wins. Everybody's happy. So like, there are other companies, sure, but most of this is being headlined by PlayStation. And PlayStation's argument so far has been that Microsoft is actively building out what will effectively be a monopoly, and it will be bad for consumers, it will be bad for competition, it will be bad for all of these other little pieces. It's just going to be bad for everybody if this acquisition goes through. Let's be honest, okay? We're going to use more than 10% of our brains on this. Let's be honest. PlayStation mainly is worried because this will mean that Microsoft gets a huge asset, which is they will have as eventually an exclusive Call of Duty. Most of this is Call of Duty. And Call of Duty is the biggest gaming franchise on the planet. It's massive, and for it to be an Xbox title is it's a freaking big deal. There's no other way to put it. Even if it like comes to PlayStation, even if it comes to platforms elsewhere for a set period of time, Microsoft owning that is very good for Microsoft, and it's not good for PlayStation. Because what do you know? PlayStation's been trying to pay for exclusive missions, exclusive advertising items, and marketing materials for every major release for the last 10 years. And this will all of a sudden become a massive franchise that they can't do that with. They can't. And before anybody says, well, PlayStation's actually better. Nah, not really. Hogwarts Legacy, what's been called by many people the best quest in that entire game, where you get to open your own shop in Hogsmeade, where you get to sell your goods to other wizards in the game, a quest where you get to go into a haunted mansion and go on this whole like semi-horror quest. That's a console exclusive to PlayStation. They paid a fat stack to cut that out of the game and make it only available to PlayStation players. And they just did that. So if you're going to come in here and pretend as though PlayStation has clean hands, they don't. They're complaining when it's convenient, and then they shut up about exclusivity and being pro-consumer when the eyes aren't on them or when it benefits them. For 1 year, I mean, it's still exclusivity. I mean, come on. Come on. I'm still pissed about this exclusive quest. Yeah, I'm baffled more people aren't talking about it. It's amazing to me. It's like actually stupid. I get it. Oh, it's exclusivity. Crimea River. You want the deal to go through. Yeah, I guess I want the deal to go through, but mainly because I want somebody to be able to hold PlayStation's feet to the fire. Right now, and we'll get to this in a moment, right now, according to most of the research that's been done recently, especially surrounding this deal, it looks like Sony holds about 70% of the market share as far as revenue is concerned in the AAA gaming market. And Xbox is cleaning it up a little bit lower than that. And then Nintendo has a little cut of it underneath that. But most of the revenue is coming into PlayStation. So for PlayStation to pretend as though they're like, oh, we're the underdogs and we need help from regulators, it's really rich. It's pretty rich. But basically what Microsoft has begun to do is they've begun to come to companies that might have been initially concerned about all of this and then win them over to support the deal. So then PlayStation looks like the whiny crybabies on the sideline, and Microsoft can just be like, look, the entire industry supports this deal. It's just this one company that's freaking out because their monopoly, their not monopoly, but their extreme control over this industry is about to be shaken up, and they don't like that. So they're trying to fight it to the nail. But all these other companies are on our side. And one of the ways they've been doing that is that they've been pledging, this was originally written in December of 2022, Microsoft pledged to put Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch if the deal was approved. So they've made this commitment. They've said they'll bring Call of Duty to Nintendo's Switch if the deal goes through. Now, when they were asked how it would run, they basically said, which is really funny to me, it will run about as well as you expect. Which is really funny because we all expect it to run remarkably poorly. And it looks like it will. So, it is what it is. It just is what it is. But they've continued on. So Microsoft, what they said, Phil Spencer said, is, quote, Microsoft is committed to helping bring more games to more people however they choose to play. Which, this is the narrative that they have to set up. PlayStation's upset with Microsoft over all of this because PlayStation is saying Microsoft is going to decrease competition. They're going to make these games exclusive, which is bad for consumers, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed to go through. And Microsoft's whole policy so far through all of this has been to say, nope, we're bringing it to more places. We're going to make it so Call of Duty's on the Switch. We're going to bring it to PlayStation for a predetermined amount of time, 7 years or something. And we're going to even possibly bring Game Pass to the Switch and to all of these other platforms. So we're going to make it better for consumers, not worse. And now what they're doing is they're putting PlayStation in a position where they have to try to argue that this is actually anti-consumer and PlayStation's practices are not, which is really, really tough to do. Let's see. The main supposed potential anti-competitive risk Sony raises is that Microsoft would stop making Call of Duty available on PlayStation, but that would be economically irrational, he said. He being Brad Smith, vice chairman and president of Microsoft. A vital part of Activision Blizzard's Call of Duty revenue comes from PlayStation game sales. Given the popularity of crossplay, it would be disastrous to the Call of Duty franchise and Xbox itself by alienating millions of gamers. And I think this is like what PlayStation realizes, and this is kind of the operative thing. Realistically, for 7 to 10 years, they will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. You'll be able to get it. But guess what? PlayStation, you're going to have to pay $70 for the game. Maybe they'll have Warzone as well. It will still be like free to play. But if you want the actual game, like it's going to be full price, all of that. And what they'll do is on Xbox, the full version of the game comes with Game Pass. So you don't have to pay extra for all of that. You don't have to pay extra for all of the cosmetics. Like they'll have microtransactions for sure. Don't get me wrong. But like the core game, when it says like buy this to get access to the multiplayer mode, that will be included in Game Pass. Whereas on PlayStation, you'll have to pay $70 for it. And over 7 years, their hope is, and Microsoft's hope is, that people are going to just say, screw it, I'll just get an Xbox. And slowly they'll start to discontinue their PlayStation use, move over to Xbox, and then become hooked on Game Pass and all of that stuff. So it's a long play, but I think it's one that's actually quite compelling and that probably works, especially because within 7 years, we'll have a new console generation, which is something to remember. I mean, we're talking so far down the line that we're talking into the PlayStation 6 and Xbox whatever, cardboard, whatever they call it, like the Xbox Chronic Compluche 4 or whatever. Their naming scheme is so screwed up, but and they're going to try to win people over slowly. That's Microsoft's play, and PlayStation knows that's their play, which is why they're kind of freaking out. Pretty straightforward. Nothing too surprising there. And, you know, over the course of the last few months, this has been a continued point of contention. There's a lot of concern from regulators that this deal would harm gamers, according to UK's regulators. But they've noticed they laid out possible remedies and they're trying to fix it. And one of these remedies that they're laying out, let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, antitrust lawyers say the CMA tends to prefer structural solutions like asset sales when faced with potential competition concerns over commitments from companies to behave in a certain way. So-called behavioral commitments, such as Microsoft's promise to make Call of Duty available on equal terms for other platform operators, can be difficult to enforce compared with structural changes, which is certainly true. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But what they're saying is that the regulators would prefer them to break off Blizzard from Activision, or to make it so, yeah, you can acquire Blizzard, but you can't acquire Activision. That has to stay an independent company. And then they can say, well, maybe just the mobile department. You can buy the mobile games and then make that a part of your business, but you can't buy the other stuff. So there's all of this other little crap that gets tossed in here. I don't know if they still want the deal if they can't get like Call of Duty. I think most of this deal is centered around Call of Duty. But I mean, then again, maybe Call of Duty is just a red herring. Maybe they're actually mostly interested in grabbing up like their mobile developers and Blizzard. Who knows? There might be they might be 4 steps ahead of this whole thing. But most of the conversation is centered around Call of Duty. So, and that's because it's the biggest franchise on the planet, so it makes sense. Let's see. Yeah, breaking up Activision's business would be like taking it back to the early 2000s before the company merged with Blizzard in a deal with Blizzard's then owner, French conglomerate Vivendi. That deal buttressed Activision's Call of Duty franchise with other series such as World of Warcraft and StarCraft. The CMA didn't specifically mention King, the Activision unit and maker of Candy Crush and other mobile games, and Activision Blizzard acquired that game maker in 2016 for $5.9 billion. Yeah, Candy Crush is still gigantic. It's ridiculous how much money that game makes. Let's see. All of this is pretty straightforward. Let's see. Microsoft officials have repeatedly expressed confidence in closing the transaction, which the company is valued at $68.7 billion after adjusting for Activision's net cash. Earlier this month, Microsoft chief executive Satya Nadella defended it at the World Economic Forum's annual event in Davos, Switzerland. I can't talk. Being a number 4 player, quote, being a number 4 player, trying to add some content and create more opportunity for publishers, more gamers to be able to enjoy. I mean, if you believe in competition, you should believe in this deal, Mr. Nadella said. I hope the competition authorities get focused on more competition, and that would be a good day. Which, in general, I can understand. I think what a lot of people are doing is they're speculating that one day in 10 years, Microsoft will make Call of Duty exclusive to Game Pass and will remove it from PlayStation entirely. And at that point, that will be anti-competitive. Which I'm not sure I even buy that, because, like, yes, they're making it exclusive, but PlayStation will have 10 years to develop a competitor. So figure it out. Like, I get it. It's a huge franchise, but nobody's going to pretend as though Call of Duty is perfect or is unbeatable. Call of Duty is extremely weak as a franchise, possibly the weakest it's ever been, just because of the negative reputation they have. Everybody who plays a lot of Call of Duty hates Call of Duty, but they still play it. It's baffling to me. But it's like, I hate this game. Anyway, let's go for another round. And so they could develop their own, but they know how hard that will be. And so they would prefer to avoid that if they can. But all of this was kind of blown up in the last 36 hours. Something new happened. Yeah, Whippy Ice. LMAO, I'm literally playing it now and I hate it. Yeah, it's weird. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, but as a video game. It's ridiculous. What happened here is Microsoft signs Call of Duty pacts with Nintendo and Nvidia as the deal faces scrutiny. Where is it? Microsoft signed pacts with Nintendo and Nvidia to access Call of Duty games for a decade if its $75 billion deal to buy the franchise's developer gets approved, part of the software maker's efforts to relieve regulators' concerns about the transaction. And here's where I'm honestly baffled. If they're like committing to a decade of public availability, that's a decade. Can they really block? And I mean, the answer is yes, they can. But should they block a deal because in a decade things might change? I don't know how you justify that, because like any big acquisition that's in the realm of billions of dollars, you could block it because in 10 years maybe this will be the monopolistic owner of all of these things. Like if it's an oil company buying a smaller oil company, you could be like, well, we're going to block this because in 10 years, this smaller company may actually be the biggest company in the world. And you acquiring them would mean that you have an unfair advantage and it will decrease competition. Like they're speculating out a decade because of this. Like I don't get how you could with a straight face say that that's a reasonable way of dealing with this stuff. Like, yeah, in a decade, if Microsoft took all of these games that are on Game Pass and that are also cross-platform and they banned them on the other platforms, would that be an anti-consumer move? I would say so, yeah. But we're talking about in a decade and if. And like another big thing, Call of Duty is so huge. If they make it available where it's included in Game Pass, maybe they make Warzone 4 or Warzone 5 at that point. That's how long we're talking. Like Warzone 5 is no longer free to play, but they make it so it's $70 on PlayStation, but it's included in Game Pass. It's available on every platform. And at Microsoft, I don't know this for a fact, but I would not be surprised at all if Microsoft offers to bring Game Pass to PlayStation. And they say, yeah, we'll bring it. You can play through xCloud through your PlayStation. But we'll bring it there so you could still play Xbox games that way. Why not? I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do that. They already have. Sony declined. I do vaguely remember that, yeah. In the past. They wouldn't allow Game Pass since they've created their own service now. Yeah, but that service, they also, like, took out a ton of games from it because they I guess just didn't like it anymore. They're like, we're going to take these off as an included game in our PlayStation Plus collection. So now if you want it, you have to buy it. You don't get it included anymore. Like there's just, again, I think there's valid arguments to be made and concerns to bring up surrounding the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. I think that there's ways that you can bring that up and discuss it and debate it. But PlayStation is the worst possible representative because they are guilty of literally everything that they're accusing Xbox of 10 times over. And recently, like they're accusing Microsoft of they're going to buy these games, they're going to get Call of Duty, and then they're going to make content exclusive to their console that isn't available to other people on other consoles just because they were able to pony up this money for it. It's like, didn't you just do that with Hogwarts Legacy? Like, just now? Like a week and a half ago you did that? Like, what? They're the worst possible people to be making this argument. And you can tell, I mean, they're starting to kind of freak out about it. They've gone on, and let's see. Yeah, you can see Mr. Smith double down on this. This is just part of our commitment to bring Xbox games and Activision titles like Call of Duty to more players on more platforms. Just very publicly being like, no, we're going to keep bringing it to people. It's going to be available everywhere. In more places when this deal goes through than before the deal. It's hard to say that they're going to do the opposite when like they're committing to not. Like maybe in a decade's time, yeah, things will change. But guess what? A lot of things change in a decade. Maybe in a decade, PlayStation will have their own Call of Duty competitor. Crazier things have happened. Also on Tuesday, Mr. Smith said Microsoft signed a 10-year deal with NVIDIA to put its games on the chip maker's cloud streaming service for computers, smartphones, and other devices called GeForce Now. Mr. Smith said the agreement would extend to Activision games, including Call of Duty, if the acquisition closes. This would be absolute ass, though. I'm just going to be real. Shooters with that latency are a nightmare, especially live, like multiplayer shooters. So maybe NVIDIA will be able to figure it out. I don't know. But today, that would be a nightmare. Gaining access to Activision's games will be, quote, a breakout moment, end quote, for NVIDIA, said Phil Eisler, vice president and general manager of GeForce Now. We're going to get into a more virtuous growth cycle. I don't know what the hell that means, but he sounds excited about it. So I guess we'll give that. I think the difference being is that Call of Duty is pretty much a guaranteed income and a sizable one at that. Yeah, I mean, Call of Duty is just going to print money. And I think that's the big thing. And also, PlayStation for years, and this is something they did with Hogwarts Legacy, they have paid for exclusive marketing rights, which doesn't sound that crazy. Like, yeah, it's a cross-platform game. You can buy it on Xbox, buy it on PlayStation, whatever. But what PlayStation will do is they will pay millions and millions of dollars, some large sum, and they will get exclusive rights to be the console used in all marketing materials. They will have PlayStation available on PlayStation or whatever pop up before the trailer and right after the trailer. And they will do that with everything. Every clip you see from the official portals will be on PlayStation controllers with the PlayStation button mappings and everything laid out. And they will make exclusive quests and things to the point where a lot of people will think that it's an exclusive even though it isn't. And that's, I was talking to somebody myself about Hogwarts Legacy, and they thought that it was a PlayStation exclusive because all the marketing was PlayStation. So they just assumed if it pops up the PlayStation logo, it's a PlayStation exclusive. And no. But they very much want you to believe that. Very much they want you to believe that. So yeah, all the commercials for Hogwarts were all PlayStation. And that's not an accident. They paid a lot of money for that. Yeah, even now I still see people who think that Hogwarts Legacy is exclusive. Yeah, very, very intentional. And they've done that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they've done that with Call of Duty titles in the past, where they've paid for exclusive content day one, and they pay for the trailers, where they get a handful of trailers that have their stuff lined out, promotional material stuff. And so, like for Sony, not being able to do that anymore, that's going to hurt them, because it's a really sort of backhanded way of, in a way, tricking players into thinking that you're the home of the game, that you are the only place they can play that game, when it's just not the case. Early beta access to, all this stuff. And so I just think that there's a lot of reasons that PlayStation is freaking out about this. And I'm not saying that they're unjustified in freaking out about it. It makes sense. It makes sense. But this is going to start to get harder and harder and harder to argue against, because now Microsoft can just come out very clearly and be like, look, we are making this available in more places. Cloud services will be able to play it. We're making it available on Switch. We're telling Sony that we want to make it available on their platform and sign agreements with them for that. But they don't want to even come to the table to negotiate. Apparently, there were some rumors that Jim Ryan hasn't even been responding to emails or calls related to the deal. He's totally checked out and is ignoring them. Are you going to tell me that he's actually fighting for the gamers, that he's actually trying to make the industry better? No. Jim Ryan is just trying to save their bottom line and to screw over this deal because it, frankly, is bad for PlayStation. But that's not anybody else's fault other than PlayStation's fault for not positioning themselves better. I've said a lot recently that it seems as though PlayStation has started resting on their laurels. I think in a lot of ways, PlayStation has gotten very comfortable. And I think that they are starting to get shaken up. Like they've been sleeping. They're the guards sleeping outside the jail thinking they're in control. And they just woke up and they realized that the people that they thought they had in a cage have broken out. And now they're frantically trying to catch them and save the situation. And it's probably just, honestly, it's probably too late, but it's going to be interesting. My money right now, I would say, I could say I'll put my money where my mouth is. Maybe I'll buy some shares of Activision Blizzard and like actually put my money where my mouth is. But I would guess that this probably goes through. I don't know how Microsoft can position themselves in such a pro-consumer light with deals and announcements like this. And then I don't get how regulators could look at that and say, I don't get how regulators could look at it and think that PlayStation is actually the one arguing in good faith here. I just don't get that. But who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of people way, way, way smarter than me that know more of what's going on. And as I've said, I still don't really know if, like, how this works, if US regulators approve the deal, but European regulators don't approve it. Like, can they still buy it because it's an American company? And they have, like, of course, offices and stuff in the UK. It's an international company, but surely they don't have to get every company or every country's approval to just do the deal. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Maybe I'll call one of my professors and see if they can explain it to me. One of my old college professors. The deal goes through, then Blizzard loses its talent shortly after. I don't think so. Most employees, they've done surveys. Most employees of these companies want the deal to go through because they hate the management of Activision Blizzard, which I don't blame them. Have you read anything about the management of Activision Blizzard? Like, oh my God. I don't blame them at all. Like, and Microsoft has already come out and they said, oh no, we totally support unionizing efforts for the games industry. We respect that. We understand why game developers want that. We can respect that. Like, without a doubt, it seems like across the board, it's better for the employees of the companies for the deal to go through because the employees are very, very confident. I think the employee union that's currently in one of the development studios under Activision Blizzard's helm, they came out and actually said that they support the deal. Yeah. Penned a letter to the EC arguing the deal will have positive impact on the labor market. CWA initially voiced concerns about the power Microsoft will have in the labor market, but later managed to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with the company should the acquisition go ahead. Like, they're already negotiating collective bargaining deals with future employees. You know, it's just again across the board. I don't know how you can say that like, well, all of the employees are going to be miserable if this deal goes through. Pretty clearly not.
He took my thing.